In this episode of Chop and Brew, we're living our best rice lager summer. 3 homebrewing neighbors try our hand at 3 different takes on this light, refreshing, surprisingly fun to brew beer style. We talk about what makes this style tick, document a couple of brew days, and share tasting notes on the final beers. Plus, you've heard of a hot scotchy? Well, we're trying hot sake. That's right. Sweet rice lager wort blended with sake. Plus, a very fun flash flood weather report from one of those brew days. Lots of fun ahead in this video. Before we get into it, a quick reminder that all Brew Day episodes of Chop and Brew are brought to you with support from Imperial Yeast, who hooked us up big time with some special pitches of their L26 Pilgrimage lager strain for our rice lager project. Learn more about it and other Imperial lager strains at imperialyeast.com. And of course, a super chill shout out to our Patreon party people like Jorge Hernandez, William Goris, and Zach Revenge of the Unicorn Barker. Join them in supporting the show at patreon.com/chopandbrew. Welcome to the garage of Chop and Brew. I'm joined by DonO and Dustin Haug. We all live within like 3 blocks of each other, so we kind of named this the Blair Avenue Rice Lager Project. What we have before us is 3 rice lagers that we all brewed. We're going to tell you a little bit about the recipes and the inspiration, but I would say before we even get into the brewing, we just kind of jokingly called this the summer of rice lager. It seemed like they were dropping a lot.
Yeah.
One-offs, a couple of people have some year-rounds. Locally, Modest has Super Deluxe. Lucky Cat Army dropped from Falling Knife. Tom from there was nice enough to give us a lot of behind the scenes details, but who helped us the most probably, Aaron Herman at Arbiter has a beer, or the brewery has a beer called Toki. They call it a Korean rice lager. It's a year-round beer, but they literally took a picture of the brew sheet and sent it to us, and then we were just like, well, now let's go. So your 2 beers are based off of Toki, loosely, pretty tightly, little loose.
Yeah.
And then I brewed a recipe out of Dave Carpenter's lager book, which is more characterful, hop forward on paper, called the Yamanote-Sen.
Yeah, that's good.
With a lot of Sorachi Ace in it. So first up, cheers. Let's go. Let's start with Don, because I think Don's, as we'll get to eventually, is the closest. I would say if you were judging this to style, this would be the highest ranked beer.
No real hop aroma. You get some kind of malt or rice. I mean, sugar grain aroma. I mean, the combination. 40% rice, 60% North Star Pils, and the lightest in color beer I probably have ever made, even with 100% Pils malt, even like my cream ales. I mean, it is just extremely crushable. Yeah. It's got a light bitterness, but mostly it's just has a sweetness. It has a, probably from the rice. Chip and I were talking about this. Like there must be a flavor from the rice that's different than corn. I think corn is more unique of a flavor when you use it in these beers, but it is different than like all Pils or all barley.
You summed it up in a very unique way yesterday when we tasted it again. You made it sound like rice actually kind of like subtracts influence to an extent, whereas corn kind of like, yes, it's fermentable, yes, it's gonna lower things, but it has a flavor.
It has a flavor.
That rice kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna step out and you're gonna taste this much more of the Pils or whatever's left.
But you made the point that it must have some kind of flavor, however light.
I think maybe we're not used to it
but,
as much.
Compared to these other 2, which I mean, I guess we can get into. Mine was 1054 to 1.008 at 6%. Couple ounces of Hallertau Mittelfra. Maybe 1 at the beginning and 1 at the end. So the least amount of hops of any of these. And that also comes through, I know, mashed at 147. Probably my lowest mash temp ever. I was told you could maybe go a little bit lower, but I didn't want to go too low, and it worked. I got all the sugar. In fact, we both agreed, maybe all of us agreed, the rice gave us more gravity than a pound. Sure. You know, pound for pound, the rice gave us more gravity than barley malt. That was interesting. We did not expect that.
So this is torrefied rice. We did not do flaked rice. We didn't do jasmine rice or cereal and mashing decoction. We went for the easiest lift. So my buddy Ilya at BSG hooked us up with a fat sack of North Star pills and a fat sack of torrefied rice. The guy from Crisp, it's Crisp torrefied rice. While doing freelance stuff for RahrBSG, I got to talk to the Crisp North American rep. He was like, yeah, people are always really surprised by the extract. You kind of got to like dial that in over a couple brews. Yeah. Because I don't want to misquote him, but he was like, it's X percentage extract, which led me to believe like, okay, maybe grain isn't, maybe this. And I remember the first running word of your brew day was like, I was like, this seems like what cornflakes get dipped into to become frosted flakes. Like it tasted like Krispy Kreme donut glaze.
Rice syrup, for sure, all the way.
One other thing I just want to say before we move from your beer, you said something very interesting. After decades of homebrewing, you thought it was funny to come back to nail this kind of beer where it's just like so much nothing. It's not like, how much can you hop it? How high can you get the alcohol and have it be drinkable? You're like, this is strangely enough the most extreme beer I feel like I've ever brewed.
I can comment on that. It's only been about 3 years, I would say, that I've kind of actively been using corn on purpose. Cream ales, cream lagers, rice has been kind of coming in there a little bit more. But I will say, and you're right, I am as tickled with this dumb beer every time I drink it than I have been with the biggest, hoppiest India Pale Lagers that I also just love. And just to have made this and to be so successful with how it came out, it's just really satisfying. It's hard to explain.
That is cool. I mean, it's like when you have a beer that you're like, this does taste like a pro beer. Like, maybe that's because you usually wouldn't brew it.
Yeah.
One more thing, just torrefied rice is different than flaked rice in that it's already been pre-gelatinized through a heating. It does still look like mashed potato flakes. I mean, it's a very flaky, snowy, flaky looking thing, but it's already had that heat process, so those starches are like readily available. It just goes right in the mash. You don't mill it. It goes into your milled grains or on top of the first dump of grains.
You can do a single infusion mash. You'll get the sugar. I did use some rice hulls with 40% rice, and I mean, I had no trouble. I don't know. Do you need them in your system?
I had a half-pound bag of rice hulls, so I just threw those in as like a safeguard.
Anyway, okay.
I don't usually have issues with the lautering, but
well, I that much, I mean, that's a decent percentage. If it was like a pound, it wouldn't matter. But
although they didn't seem to get gluey when I was mashing, like and stirring it up. Chip was over there, and we took like some looks at it, and it's in there, but it wasn't like, I don't know, it wasn't
like flaked oats.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was waiting. I was like, is it going to dissolve even, or is it going to stay?
148.
Boom.
I will take that.
Let's talk about Dustin's beer. So Dustin's beer, same grist, 60% North Star Pills, 40% torrefied rice.
Yeah, because you can still see like the white rice, but it's really like broken down.
Yeah, it looks less big.
Yeah.
It looks smaller. That's the word I'm looking for, smaller. We have some great video from Brew Day. Outside Brew Day is kind of nice. Got interrupted by a crazy wind or a rainstorm.
Yeah. The hail pinging off the top of the boil kettle.
Oh my gosh, yo. It's blue sky. What's going on? Tsunami rice lager.
Yes, let's go.
Thankfully, we weren't brewing yet or boiling yet. Someone pointed out, they're like, because I posted a short of that, they're like, God, you put the top on while you're boiling? Like, no, dude. It's still mashing. That boil kettle is fine. But I kind of thought it was fitting that it just like, we got a deluge here right before you guys came over. I was like, oh, like Brew Day goes tasting day. So tell us a little bit why yours is different than Don's on Brew Day even.
Yeah, like Chip said, the same exact malt bill, basically 60% the North Star Pills, 40% the crisp torrefied rice, and I ended up getting a little bit of a higher original gravity. I'm forgetting exactly what the...
It was in the 60s. Like
it was in the 60s, and then it kind of like dropped to maybe like 1010 or something like that. But it ended up hitting more like 7.2, 7.3 for ABV in the end. And I tipped it a little bit harder, I think, with the hops. So I bittered with an ounce of Magnum, and then a couple of late boil additions. I think I did like total 3 ounces each of Saphir, Tettnang, and Ariana.
Yeah.
And I think I like split that between like a flame out edition and then maybe like a 15 or 20. I'd have to go back and take a look at that. But I wanted to push the hop character just a little bit more in it.
I would say this is our India rice lager.
Oh, totally.
Of the three.
Yeah.
Bitterness, strength, just character.
It has kind of lemony aroma, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty firm bitterness. It's, if you were trying to make a crushable Korean rice lager, then it's not that.
It is
it's
not.
Very drinkable. But yes, more like a India rice lager. India Pale Rice Lager, IPRL, whatever.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, it kind of tips into cold IPA territory.
It does. A lot of what we talked
That's
about
interesting.
as
Yeah.
we were getting ready
Yeah.
for this project was like, how is this not too different?
Yeah.
I think the hopping on paper for rice lager versus what you and even mine kind of does.
I didn't dry hop it,
Right.
so like that's maybe like a departure there. And I wanted it to be, I mean, that's the thing I like about German pills is that it has that assertive hoppiness to it, and so I used all German hops in it, but I didn't want it to be, like a modern, more on that like fruitier, softer hoppiness. I wanted
it's
a little bit more noble-y, old school character
pretty
to
firm.
it. So.
Pretty firm bitterness.
You guys both use Pilgrimage, which Imperial Yeast hooked us up with. It's not even usually year-round for homebrewers, but they gave us a special pitch from the pro side, mainly because that's what Aaron at Arbiter uses in his Toki, or their Toki. Whereas I used Global. I wanted to showcase some year-round example of Imperial Yeast, since they're always so kind to like hook us up. So mine is basically, it's a little less percentage. It's of the rice. It's 8 pounds. It's 80% pills, 20% he calls for flaked rice. We use a torrefied. Sorachi Ace, Stritzel Spalt. Since I did it brew in a bag, I kind of did the mash step, the step mash that he suggests. 144 for 45 minutes, 162 for 45 minutes, 170 for kind of a mash out. Again, he acknowledges that this is kind of in the style of the premium lagers of Japan, which rely on the rice to lighten the body, adds crispness to the style. I almost said crispness, and helps dry out the finish. We're doing something unique. You've heard of the hot scotchy, where you take the first runnings of a beer wort, mix it with a shot or so, or maybe a little more than a shot of scotch, and you get this kind of really nice layered malt beverage. To Don's point, as he just pointed out, a lot of times the scotch kind of punches up a little bit, whether that's the smokiness, the alcohol. What we got, since we're brewing a rice lager in the Japanese tradition of rice lagers, we got sake. This is Snow Angel Sake Nigori, only 12.5% on a 100-degree day.
And that would be a cloudy sake. There is distinction between cloudy, and then many of them are clear.
Right. This other one we could have used
I can't tell you what
is clear, but
the reason is, but
because my brew in a bag wort is also extremely cloudy with no recirc or vorloff, we thought we would match cloudy with cloudy.
that's
Cheers.
Konnichiwa. Arigato.
You get a little booze because it's like coming into that really 170-ish degree wort. It's also not true first runnings because it's just in a bag, but the sugar does go to the bottom where we pulled it off. I just get like this rice pudding, having made rice pudding a handful of times in the Instant Pot. This is kind of where I my brain goes.
Well, it is a rice wine, I think, of sorts, and I am somewhat familiar with the flavor and aroma of sake, so in a little bit of the wort, you mix it like that, it comes through.
It's a little doughy, a little yeasty. It is sweet though, because that wort, we didn't take a gravity reading after this rest, but before the first rest, it was at 13 bricks.
Yeah. It's nice enough. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it is, just because it's a lower alcohol and not as strong of a flavor as a full-on spirit, it's not gonna, like, have that same effect, but
Yeah.
it's fun. It's yummy. And also, like,
But
yeah,
it
the
matches
color,
the color.
it does.
I tried to
Very
do like
nice.
2 little hand recircs in a measuring cup, and I was like, this is going nowhere. Let's just do the cloudy one.
Yeah. You just hope that the beer gets clear and that
Oh.
eventually in the end.
When you taste just the sake, you can tell how much sweetening the wort is truly doing. That is drier, for lack of a better word.
But
Herbal.
this one has more of a, quote, body or viscosity than if it's clear.
Right.
Because I've had the cloudy and then the clear, and like I'm assuming it's yeast or other sort of proteins or something, but it does change it a little bit. Never heard of a hot sake before.
Yeah,
Well,
other than hot sake.
Right, I was just gonna say they do serve it hot.
But on a brew day, hot sake. Yeah, so just something
Perfect.
else interesting to work into this already interesting project.
And it's like 90 degrees too
It
out
is.
here.
It's hot sake for the sake of hotness.
Probably need some ice water one of these days, eh?
But he points out, unlike most premium lagers from whatever country you're in, these do kind of push the hop. And I started drinking the Sapporo as part of this project a little bit more, and that's brewed by Stone because they're in cahoots, so it's fresh, whether it's from Escondido or River Mills, not River Mills, maybe. Either way, it's brewed in our country now, so it'd be an import. So it's like also a fresh version of this rice lager, which is cool.
Yours is definitely less bitter than that one. More bitter than mine. More hop flavor. Also quite nice. And I mean, the side note is that you fermented this lager yeast at warmer-ish temperatures.
Yep.
And no standout problems or effects from doing that.
And it's only been kegged for about a week. I would say my first pours were kind of sulfury, but I feel like that's already gone away. This is not, I would say, we need to point out, yours is probably the lagerist of them. You brewed it first. It's been kegged for at least 3 weeks.
No.
No?
More.
That's
July
what I'm saying.
8th? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's on its way
5 weeks.
because it's crystal clear.
6.
Well, and you pressure fermented it too, so
I did. I looked at my notes. It was in the low 60s even still.
It'll be nice after time. Right now it's a little Keller rice lager because it's definitely hasn't cleared up. I'm probably going to gelatin it and keg, but I think actually for our tasting it would be nice if one of them was just like a little younger, maybe a little more yeast in suspension. I want to do a real quick intermission here, tasting notes. As I'm editing this video, this beer is probably about 2 weeks older in the keg. It is clarified much more just on its own without gelatin. A little bit darker golden color than Don's and Dustin's. I think that's because of the higher percentage of Pilsner malt than rice. But I will say that this is getting to be much more of coming back into that lemongrass flavor of that Sorachi Ace. But as it lagers longer in the keg, it's getting this really nice woody note. Not a charred wood oak, not a spirit oak, but just like the natural nude wood, I guess as you would say, American French oaky kind of vibe. I'm getting some vanillin. I think that is from the hops as well. It's funny when you hear wood or something like vanilla, or I've heard hops that give chocolate. These are descriptors we're not used to hearing, but that is what's kind of happening with some of these hops. So I definitely think I'm getting this kind of natural oak aged lager vibe from this, and it can only be pretty much from those hops. The rice and the pills, just keeping it really solid, neutral, but also characterful malt foundation. Hops are doing something very different. I feel like me, Don, and Dustin all did a very good job of representing the style in a full range, from Don being fairly neutral, clean, crisp, Dustin way bitter, little IPL vibes, little lemon, and then I'm kind of in here with this lemony, woody, herbal take on the style. So very exciting to see. Great way to wrap up this summer. Ambient temps in the basement, but I did ice jugs on the side to the point where it actually got what I thought was maybe too low on day one. I was like, oh crap, we should actually let this warm up. I was like amazed that it worked that well. I've done the jugs in a cooler before, but I've never just done them like on the side with a little thermarest, little camping pad. So yeah, I'm eager to see what this is like after I hit it with gelatin, give it some actual true time, try to stop drinking it for a bit and give it 2 or 3 weeks. Lemony, herbal. The Sorachi Ace used to get a bad rap for being dill and like dill pickle. I don't get any of that. I do get this woody, kind of woody earthiness. Yesterday you used the word earthy.
Yeah, I think I did.
But it's also not as... I remember some Sorachi Ace beers when Sorachi Ace first hit the scene in the early 2010s that were like lemon bombs. In a good way to me, because I like that, but I think a lot of people... It was a divisive hop for sure. But I think the only reason that hop exists is because Sapporo uses a ton of it.
Have any idea how many ounces of hops total?
Yeah, it was bittered with 1/4 ounce of Sorachi, and then there was a mix of Strisselspalt and Sorachi, so less than an ounce. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right at an ounce of each.
This dude here has got
9 ounce.
But I mean, like even in these wide open cups, and from the way we're doing this, like yours, I did get like a hop aroma, even just in this context, and maybe a little bit to yours, maybe more yesterday when I was tasting it, but you know, that just goes to show you're gonna get the aroma out of it, what you put into it.
So I would say the cliff notes of all of this is it's a cool style, light drinking, like super light drinking. You mash low, you got a high-ish percentage of some kind of rice. Jasmine rice is extremely expensive, but I see brewers using it. I think on a homebrew scale it's probably easier, but I think a lot of those products you have to cereal mash or do a decoction. The torrefied rice, boom, super easy. And it's almost like the first time you use that MCI stout malt, and it gets you so much more extract than like your regular pale or two-row. You know, remember
I haven't used it.
I remember that being a thing too. People are like, dude, I'm going like 8 points over gravity using this MCI stout malt, and you're like, dang. So it's kind of like that kind of light bulb moment again, where you're like, oh, this ingredient is pulling its weight. Mash low.
It's a cool palette to paint on, right? With like you're playing with Sorachi, you know, doing a little bit more traditional, like throwing a lot more hops at it. Like it steps up when you don't have a lot of other things behind it, but then it gives you a backbone or whatever on which, you know, because I was like, all right, I'm gonna throw a bunch of these German hops in here and see what happens, and it's like, okay, well, we can balance that out without having too much of its own character, like contrasting with that.
Yeah, I could see doing an India Pale Lager with some kind of more, I forget what kind of other base malt they use, but not putting in my white sugar and doing like a couple pounds of rice and just, you know, it would accomplish a similar kind of a thing and be fun to go that way too.
That would be, that's where the classic isn't a cold IPA just an IPL argument is, when people are using the rice to bring it down, but it's just one of those things,
it's
right?
Same type of beer.
I like it. I would like to. It made me think about using rice in like a saison, something where you really like the dry and maybe actually want malt to step out of the way, say, depending on what yeast you're using, you really want the funky yeast or the phenolic yeast. I don't know. And you come back to yours, it's so much like Ham's old style, not necessarily in taste, but like just palate, mouthfeel. Like that is the boat beer.
Yeah.
Totally.
Where's the boat?
Yeah.
And it's not thin, you know, like something like you can get like a thin beer. It's like it still has good flavor. But
Well, it isn't like a Coors Light,
Totally.
but it is. Yeah, it's like some type of lighter drinking beer.
So if you've got a favorite rice lager, put that in the comments below. Let us know where we should be looking. If you've brewed rice lagers, tell us a little bit what hop profiles you like, maybe what other base malts. Most importantly, shout out to a bunch of people like Toki. A can of Toki started this whole thing at the beginning of the summer, and we were like, I wonder how they make this. And then like not a day later, somebody from the brew is like taking me in the back to see the brew log. I was like, here's how they made it. Thanks to BSG, RahrBSG, Ilya, for giving us the big drops of the North Star Pills and the torrefied rice. Thanks for Imperial
Yeast
for hooking up some yeast that homebrewers usually can't get that easily. Dave Carpenter, Lager Book. I would definitely suggest this book. It's got some awesome recipes in the back, and it's just like a breakdown of all the styles and the brewing techniques. One last thing to shout out, even though we just mentioned Arbeiter, Don is hoping to go to Arbeiter and have a side-by-side with brewer Aaron Herman with Toki on tap, fresh at the brewery, and his version. So definitely, if you're not already following Don's channel, do that, and hopefully you'll see kind of a little pro-am-y tasting notes.
Yeah, check it out. Should be fun.
In the very near future. I would suggest this brew summertime, obviously, but even through the winter. I mean, this, to Don's point, could just be the beer you now have on one tap all the time. Look out for Imperial's Pilgrimage. If it comes out, it's usually a seasonal kind of in the winter. That would be a fun one to use because it clearly works. Global is also a great go-to. Pretty much your favorite lager yeast, I would think, would work here. Rice for rice.
Brew for brew.
Hey!